right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our weekly 30-minute webinar. My name is Kevin Sweeney. I'm a customer success manager here at Verify, and I will be your host for today's session. Today's webinar is on cloud calling migration, where we'll be covering some essential reporting strategies. Here to walk us through it, we have our Director of Engineering, Victor Verba. Vic, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Happy it's Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday indeed.
Yep. I know migration is a pretty hot topic these days, so I'm definitely excited to see what you've got for us today.
Great.
All right. And please note that these webinars are always recorded and posted by the end of the week, so you can review them at any time. Check out the webinars page at verify.com for all our past and upcoming webinars. Just a quick little agenda. First, we'll start off with a quick overview of what Verify can do for you. Then we'll jump into a live demo where Vic is going to walk us through some of these reports and how to build them. We'll pause for Q&A. So during the demo, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them over there in the chat. And then after that, after the Q&A, we'll reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card. So hang around and see if you've won. Quick overview of Verify. Verify is the preferred analytics and management solution tool for Cisco, Zoom, and now Microsoft Teams collaboration. It's deployable either on-prem or as a hosted cloud solution. We provide industry-leading call reporting and analytics, as well as customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, change management, Cisco, and Zoom call reporting. And our most recent addition as a Verify 16.1 is Microsoft Teams call reporting. If you have any questions on any of our features, please contact us at support@verify.com or reach out to your account manager if you're already in touch with them. Another thing before we get started, for an additional fee, Verify offers an enhanced consulting service to our customers. Verify's SE team engages with you on a one-to-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, report building, dashboard configuration, and system monitoring assistance. This is a service that will provide you with a dedicated Verify SE to really do the heavy lifting, just giving you a stress-free, hands-off experience. So for more information on that, please contact us or, again, your account manager, and we'd be glad to speak more in depth about pricing in terms of service for an enhanced consulting services or ECS. And with that, let's get into the wild, Vic. I'll pass that over to you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you all for joining us again. My name is Victor Verba, and today I'm talking a little bit about migration. Migration, like Kevin had said, is a pretty hot topic right now. A lot of people that we work with that are current customers, as well as customers that are looking for more information as they're starting to kind of explore their journey into a cloud-based calling scenario. And a lot of things that they're really trying to do is really determine what needs to be migrated, what's still being used, what's not being used. What calling plans am I trying to make sense out of, and how do we do that without the data? So today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about reports, and I'll get into a few of the reports that people are running. But this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what we're doing with a lot of our customers. So I will preface this by, if you guys are in the process of migrating, thinking about migrating to a cloud-based platform, maybe even just going through some trials with some of the cloud-based providers, cloud-based calling providers. If you have Verify or don't, it's a great time to engage your customer service rep over here at Verify. We do have some offerings built around our cloud migration that does come with a whole wealth of information to be able to kind of help you along your journey. We work with a lot of customers in their migration to really just kind of help them better understand their current environment so they can really make data-driven and educated decisions about what they're going to migrate, how they're going to migrate it. Do we need a contact center? Can we get away with essentials? Can we continue to use hunt groups? That type of thing. Those are the type of questions we're being asked. So today we're going to spend a little bit talking about those scenarios, and I'll show you some simple reports that you can build in the next 30 or so minutes that'll kind of help you better understand some of that environment. Right? So the first one I'm going to talk a little bit about is dormancy. So what do I mean by dormancy? I mean phones that aren't being used. And I'm going to throw out a really good analogy because somebody gave this to me and it really stuck. And it's when you're getting ready to move. Let's say you're moving your house, and you're paying movers to move all your stuff. Do you want to pay them to move stuff that you're going to bring to the new house and then throw away? No, you don't want to have to pay them for that. You want to really clean your house before you move over to the new house. So that way you're not paying an arm and a leg for somebody to move a bunch of stuff that's basically garbage. So really like that analogy because it sticks with what we see our customers looking for. So when I talk about dormancy, let's say you go into a call manager. It's been there, it's been running, hands have changed multiple times. It's been running for 15 years through multiple people and multiple administrators. So how do we really diagnose what needs to go over to my new calling platform? What's still being used? What's not being used? And that's more from a device perspective, but it could also be users in your call manager as well. So what I'm going to focus in on this report right here is dormancy. And you may have seen some webinars on how to run a dormant report, and we're going to kind of walk through it because this is probably one of the number one things we see people coming to us for is just to decide what do I need to move. If I've got 5,000 devices in my call manager, but only 2,000 of them are actually being used in the last 30, 60, 90, 120 days, do I really need to try to migrate 5,000 devices to my new platform? No, that's called garbage in, garbage out. We don't want to do that. We want to basically clean up what we can. So that way, when we are moving over to a web-based platform, we're actually moving what needs to be moved. And we're making educated, data-driven decisions about what should be moved and how it should be configured. So the first report I'm going to start off with is basically a dormancy report. Now, if you haven't downloaded our templates from the website, this is a template. You don't have to create this from scratch, but I do kind of want to walk people through how to create this because it's actually a pretty simple report, but it's an extremely powerful report. So from our history search or from our report section, there's two different ways to do the same thing. I'm going to work out of our history section here, and I'm just going to choose our devices. And when I'm looking at devices, I want to choose both an originating and terminating device name because I'm strictly really focused in on what devices haven't been used. So I'm going to choose an originating and terminating device name, and I don't want to have to import all my MAC addresses and things into a verify report. There's no need to do that. So I'm going to change my Boolean statement here to be starts with, and I'm just going to type in SCP. SCP are going to be your hard phones, your 8851s, your 7900s, things like that. Those are going to be all your hard phones. So what we're going to do here is identify all calls to or from our hard phones. Now, I'm going to go ahead. We have some soft phones out there, so I'm just going to click that little plus sign and add a couple other things in here. I'm going to add my IPC phones, my IP communicators. I may want to add my soft phones or my CSF devices, but essentially all I'm doing is really just identifying the device types in my environment without having to go through and choose physical type of device, because that, again, can be a little bit cumbersome. There's a lot of different device types out there. Could you go through and just select the devices that you want? Absolutely. But there's no need to do that in this case. We're taking the easy road. We're just going to add some of our devices in here, and we'll just do starts with, and I don't know, I'm going to add some of my TCT devices, and we'll keep it simple. So essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm building a report, and I'm just going to look at the current day and view my results. Now, what we've done here is we said, okay, give us all of the call records that actually have values that meet my search criteria. So all of these calls down here are going to have a hard phone, a soft phone, a TCT device, or anything in here. So if I look through here and pick out my device names, let's see if I've got my device names in here. Yep, there we go. I see my SCP devices. I see some SIP trunks in here, but they went to an SCP device. So our step one was really just identifying the devices that we're going to find that have no data. All right. So step one is we find them and we find all of the data. But part two of that is now that we have the data, we want to be able to say, okay, now we know we have calls for these devices, but we don't want to see these in our report. We just want to see the devices that didn't show up in our report. All right. I know that could be a little bit confusing, but essentially the way that we're going to work this is we're going to go through and we're going to find all of the calls that have SCP devices and IPC devices and CSF devices and so on, and whatever other devices that we put in here. But then what we're going to do is we're going to leverage call grouping. All right. So what we're going to do is turn this guy on, and we're going to group off our device names again. And we're going to do both the originating and terminating device name. The same thing we're searching off for, we're going to go ahead and group off of. But the key here is we're going to change this value. So this means that the maximum primary grouping count is going to be 0 calls. All right, and that's the key to this particular report, because essentially what we want to get is we want to get all of the calls or all of the phones that match this description but have 0 calls in my search. So it's kind of almost like a reverse lookup, where what we're going to do is we're going to first gather all of the data, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to say, okay, we have all of these MAC addresses and this 130 calls. Now go through and find all of the MAC addresses that we don't have from Call Manager in our list. And here again, of course, it went ahead and I got 130 calls. Let me go ahead and adjust my filter here. And grouping, originating device name. Let's go ahead and add our grouping filters in here. And we're going to put our devices. Now, what we're going to do here is really just mimic essentially what we have in our search sets. So we're going to go ahead and do originating or terminating device name. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to add all this. Let me show you what the template looks like. So give me 1 second here. And essentially, instead of adding all this stuff in here, there is a template available on our website. That's this guy. You can see our search sets. I have more devices in my search sets, but again, the same concept that we just went through. And essentially, I have my minimum and grouping, and I'm grouping off my search set criteria. All right, so I just check marked this box. So when we run this report right here, give you guys an example of what it looks like. And again, if you don't want to have to build these reports, you don't have to. This is a great report that is available on our website for download. And essentially what this did is this just went through my Call Manager. First thing it did is it found all of the CDR that contained my search criteria. Again, my search criteria being my devices that I want to find. And then we did a reverse lookup. We said, now out of all of these MAC addresses that I have, find the ones that I don't have and produce those from Call Manager. So imagine running this for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. This is essentially going to go through all of the, I'm going to call garbage that you have in your Call Manager and output a great report that is basically going to detail all of the devices that you do not have in your Call Manager or that have not had calls in the amount of time. Now, I only ran this for a day, but when you guys are doing something like this, you're going to want to run this for 3 months or 6 months and essentially get a list of all of the phones that you can then remove from your Call Manager, remove from your cutover plan to the new web-based platform. And again, eliminate the garbage out. You don't want the movers to have to move a bunch of garbage and then try to clean it up when it's in your new location. So this is really the #1 report that we see people utilizing a lot with migrations, because this is the stuff you don't want to pay somebody to cut over. This is the stuff you don't want to have to manually cut over because it's not being used. It's not even properly configured. All right. So the next one I'm going to talk about, instead of looking at calls that have no usage, we're going to look at a little bit of calls that have minimal usage, because that may be just as important in making a decision on what you want to cut over as opposed to what you don't want to cut over. So this concept of this report is really the same as the one that we just ran. However, the one difference you're going to notice here, and I'm focusing just on hard phones here, is that rather than using a grouping count of 0 will bring back all phones that have 0 calls. We want to bring back calls that have a maximum of only 10 calls, but at least 1. I don't want to get all of the calls that I just ran in this report on here. I just want to see all of my calls in like the last several months that have only had 10 calls. So think about that. You know, you're making a decision on moving to a new platform. You're paying for things on a user-based level rather than maybe a flex licensing level. So if each one of these phones belongs to a user and they've only made 10 calls in the last several months, do I need to go ahead and give them a calling license? So this is a great report to be able to do that. And here's one that's based off of physical and underutilized phones. The concept that we did is the same. We're going to use our starts with, we're going to add our devices in there, and we're going to choose our same originating or terminating device name. But in this case, we're going to keep our call history detail. The reason we're keeping our call history detail is because we are actually looking at calls. In other words, we're looking for phones that had calls in this case, not phones that did not have calls. So we keep our call history detail here. And when we run this guy, and let me give him a quick run, essentially what we're going to see here are all phones that only had calls, but had a very minimal amount of calls. So I'm going to expand my time range here. And let's look at the previous 7 days. And let's see what we've got as far as what phones in my phone system have only had 10 calls in the last 7 days. Again, now this is a great report to be able to run. What we're doing here is identifying what could either be changed as you migrate to your new platform, or what you can make business decisions on and data-driven decisions on are, do these need to be cut over? So here's an example. I've only got 2 phones in the last 7 days that had less than 10 calls. But again, keep in mind, if you're running this for several months, that's important information, because if somebody only had less than 10 calls in several months, you may not want to cut that over to your new environment and pay for those additional licensing. So this report, again, easy to build. Concept is the same as what we did before. So if I go back to my history search, I have my devices in here. I'm going to go ahead and export those. And again, it's all about the grouping. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and keep my minimum primary grouping count to 1, because I want any phone that appears in here to at least have 1 call. I've already got a dormancy report. I don't need another one. And then I'm going to change my maximum primary grouping count to 10. That means anybody that shows up in here is only going to have a maximum of 10. Now, that may be small for you as you're going through your environment. You may say, hey, you know what? I'm going to run this for, let's say, 8 months or 9 months or a year. I only want to see phones that haven't had 30 calls in that time range. You can make that adjustment here. This is your threshold. You have the ability to kind of customize this and set your own threshold. So you would just add that, your maximum primary grouping count. If you want to see the details of all these calls, you can leave that on, or you could always just toggle that off. And then you could go ahead and run your report. In this case, I just left the detail on. We'll get a bunch of columns, but not too many. And there we go. I can see total of 130 calls. That's okay. This is just the total summary of all of this information right here. What I'm focused in on is the grouping, and the grouping identifies the phones that have less calls than what I set as my threshold. So again, a great report to be able to kind of help clean up that call manager and eliminate a lot of the garbage from moving to your new platform. Extremely important, because this not only affects how your new platform is designed, but it also affects how much you're going to be paying on that new platform. This is important information when you are thinking about migrating to those new platforms. Another one that's really common, and we see this a lot with customers going to web-based platforms, is, look, I've got all these phones, I've got all these devices, I've got this call manager that's been out there, has been for years, it's been running great. But do I really need this particular calling plan, or can I get away with this calling plan? Does this person need PSTN access or not need PSTN access? So that's extremely important, because that's going to impact your bottom line. So that's going to impact what you pay and how your users are set up. So how do you determine? And I'm going to start off with probably one of the bigger ones. I want to see the users that have no external calls. And we're going to focus in on devices. So, do I have devices out there that have calls, but just not external calls? In other words, do these folks need PSTN access? So when I'm thinking about how I'm going to license my users, this is an important decision to make, because this affects how much you guys end up paying as you're starting to migrate your users and what calling plan those users are going to have. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with devices again. So in this case, we're going to use device name, and we're going to do both originating and terminating device name again. But what I want to do here is I'm going to isolate how I define my external calls, either inbound or outbound. In my case, we use SIP gateways. It's actually relatively easy for me. I'm just going to go ahead and do starts with SIP. That's going to isolate all my SIP gateways. And right now I'm just looking at the current day's data. We'll keep that as it is to keep our report a little bit smaller. So essentially what we did here is really just isolated all calls that went through a SIP gateway. That's great. Now we're going to take that concept that we just learned from grouping and how we reverse that and see just the calls or the extensions or the devices, in my case, that didn't fall into this category, that don't have data that fits into an external call. So for that, again, we're going to go ahead and export our results. All right, so we got our search here. We've got our originating and terminating device, starts with SIP. For me, that identifies all my SIP gateways, easy peasy. The next thing we're going to do is our grouping. Again, we're going to group off of originating or terminating device name, and we're going to keep that. We're going to go ahead and keep our minimum grouping count to 0 and our maximum grouping count to 0 also. All right, so this guy is probably the most important. Second most important thing for this is we're going to go ahead and do our grouping search sets. and we're going to add a grouping search set. So in this case, I'm going to do my grouping search set, and I'm going to choose my originating or terminating device name starts with SEP. And again, I'm isolating my hard phones. And you can add, just like we did in that other report, you can add your CSF devices, your IPC devices, and things like that, and add those in here. We're going to give this guy a name. We'll just say SEP devices. That looks good. And that's kind of it. So essentially what we're doing for this report is we're isolating, first step of this report is we're isolating all the calls that went to your SIP gateways. That's going to give us a list of every call that went in or out. But then we utilize our grouping and this guy here to say, okay, now out of all of those calls that went to my SIP gateway, I want you to reverse lookup. Go out to my call manager and find out what MAC addresses or what SEP devices are not on that first list. The first list being all the calls that went to my SEP devices. So now we can go ahead and simply give this guy a run. And this one may take a little bit longer, but not too bad. And now we have a list of all devices that did not have an external call. So when I'm thinking about my calling plans, and again, I'm running this off a MAC address, there's multiple ways to run this, but when I'm starting to think about my calling plans and what calling plan Kevin's going to fit into versus what calling plan Victor's going to fit into, this is a great way to be able to help, again, identify who should fit into what particular calling plan. And that's not just limited to internal. We see that same thing with external calls for calling plans for international. Who needs an international calling plan? Some of your folks may need an international calling plan. Some of them may not. So that same concept of doing those searches can be done any number of ways, where in this case, I'm focusing really on devices, but I can focus in on numbers. I can say, you know what, show me any international call. I can do that by saying, show me anything that has a calling, original, or final called party number that starts with 011. All right, that's gonna isolate all my international calls, or maybe it's 9011, and we'll say starts with 9011. I don't know if I have any, so this won't take long. But essentially, what this is going to do is this is going to output a list of all of my 911 call or my international calls. So when I'm starting to make a decision on do I need an international calling package, what kind of international calling package do I need? Who needs an international calling package within my organization? I can utilize this to help make that determination. And then rather than using anything like a 0 maximum primary grouping, I may just want to say only show me users that have one international call, and that's going to outlist a list of either your users depending on what you're grouping on or your devices depending on how you group that. Again, I don't have any international calls in my environment here, so I'm not going to run that report. It'll just come up blank. Right. So that's a lot. Those are some of the things that we see from customers asking about data. In other words, how do I improve that experience? How do I move things over? What do I need to move over? Those two reports in the last 15 or so minutes are vital to be able to make those decisions on what you want to be able to move, what types of calling plans you should use, and how you should move those. So within just a couple of minutes, we were able to really build those reports out, and we see a ton of people using those as they're starting to look towards their migration. On the same line, other things that we've added or you can do within the Verify system from a reporting perspective, we're not just limited to CDR reporting or call analytics reporting. We have a lot of customers that take advantage of our change management as well. So not strictly just relying on the call analytics, but also understanding the environment better. As you're starting to move over, you may be able to, you may want to know what hard phones you have in your environment that are even cloud capable. So that's a big question. If you've got hard phones that have been sitting out there for the last 10 years and they haven't been updated, are you going to move those? Do you want to move those? Are you moving off of hard phone completely? And if you are your employees ready to move off of hard phone completely? That may be a good question. And that's something that you can see from analytics is who's using their hard phones, who's using their soft phones. But in this particular case, what we're going to focus in on are your devices. So under the change management side of things, looking more at the as-built reporting, there's a report that's in here that's going to go ahead and output the version number and the hardware revision of your hard phones. So this is an existing report. You can either run it manually. In this case, I've got one kind of queued up over here. It is the IP phone serial report. But if you were going to go ahead and run something like this manually, you can come in here and say IP phone serial number and firmware CDP. All right, so this particular report right here is going to output a lot of information for you. But a couple of the key things it's going to export are going to be serial numbers, hardware revisions, and versions of those phones. That type of information is vital to understand. Is your phone currently cloud capable? So I'm just going to give this guy a quick name, and we'll run this guy real quickly off of a snapshot here. All right, so this is going to output a nice CSV file. So that way you have the ability to sort. And of course, I ran that. Let me go ahead and run this off my live inventory. Actually, let me run this off a live cluster here. Give me 1 second. We're going to switch gears. So this cluster I know has got a couple of phones in it, I believe. Let's see if we've got some in here. And we'll run it off our current real-time inventory. This is a pretty small cluster, so it should run relatively quickly here. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to open this guy up, and we're just going to add a filter on our columns. And there's 3 columns, really 2 columns in here that are going to be most important. That's going to be the serial number, or I'm sorry, the hardware revision. And if this guy doesn't kick off, I'll just go ahead and bring one up for us. But it'll be the hardware revision and the ID. So let's go ahead and take a look at this report. And there we go. So simple enough. What we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and add a filter onto this report. And we're going to cruise over. I'm going to expand these just so we can see all the columns here. And I'm going to expand these over here. And we're going to scroll right over here to our version ID and our hardware revision. Now, you may have a list of a lot of phones in here, which is a great, nice thing about Excel is it's very easy to just say, hey, you know what? I don't want to see anything that's got a hardware revision that is blank. Let's do that. And now I've got all my phones, their version IDs, and their hardware revisions. Nice thing about this is not something that you can pull from Call Manager. This information is directly pulled from the phone during this report. So it's going to give you an accurate depiction of where that phone currently is from a version, how many times, if it's been, the firmware has been updated multiple times, but also where it is from a hardware revision. This information can then be taken back through Cisco to determine is that particular phone you're looking at or which ones are cloud capable. So we see a ton of people being able to leverage this to really determine how many phones do I need to buy if I move over to a new platform. All right. Another great plan or another great one we see, and I know we're running low on time, is going to be the route plan report. And I won't go too far into that. I think it's pretty much speaks for itself. It's the ability to go ahead and identify and report your route plans. We see a lot of people doing these migrations, and route plan migrations from a Cisco Call Manager over to a web-based calling platform is not it's not kind of apples to apples. There's a lot that goes into that. So one of the things you can do is run either hunt plant reports or route plan reports. These are absolutely fantastic reports to run to really give somebody an idea whether you're entertaining or talking to a particular partner or a vendor about your migration. This is an awesome report that you could provide them. Shows you exactly how your patterns are set up, your lists, your devices, your route groups. Same thing with hunt groups, how your hunt groups are set up, how your hunt lists are set up, who they're routing to. These are great reports to be able to provide over to those providers. And Kevin, I'm probably going to run out of time a little bit before I get to everything that I wanted to get. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about before we do go ahead and stop is the ability to maintain compliance is probably the second biggest thing that we see with customers migrating to web-based platforms. And what is that? That is data compliance, not only from a call data perspective, but also from a configuration perspective. So within Verify 16.2, if you're not familiar with it already or missed that webinar, we did do a webinar specifically on decommissioning Call Manager clusters. That's going to give you the ability to stay within compliance. In other words, what does that mean? That means I can, even if I decommission my Cisco Call Manager, I can retain the data in Verify, have all the reporting I've always had, and still be able to see that data even with no Call Manager. You're not getting new data, but you're not going to anyway. You've already done that migration. So the decommissioning of a cluster is an option within Verify. A lot of customers are taking advantage of that because they don't need the Call Manager anymore, but that doesn't mean they don't need the data for the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. If you're in a healthcare industry, you're required to save that data for like 7 years. So if you're not storing that data or you just decide to get rid of Call Manager data, well, you're out of compliance. So with Verify, you can decommission. You can house that data as long as you want to be able to house it for that's not just the call data, but that's also the snapshots and configurations of those call managers, which are just as important. We see a lot of people that start really migrating to new platforms, but what they'll do is they'll come back and somebody will say, hey, this doesn't seem to be working right. Our call volume doesn't look the same as it used to. Can we see what the changes, how the call manager was configured? Well, if you've already decommissioned your call manager, the answer is no, we don't even have that call manager anymore. But the nice thing about with Verify is you're able to retain that call data, but you're also able to retain how that call manager was configured. So if I needed to see how users were configured, route lists were configured, translation patterns were configured, devices or departments were configured, with Verify, you do have the ability to go back and see that historically. So if somebody comes back to you 6 months after your migration, they said, I don't think this is working right. Is it set up properly? You now have the ability to go back and see if it was set up properly and say, nope, yeah, our configurations now are the same as they were before. So again, appreciate everybody hanging out. Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and kick the ball back to you for any Q&A we have here.
Sorry, there was one CSV report that some folks didn't see right before the Hunt Group performance. Do you still have that pulled up there?
This one right here?
If you're sharing anything, yeah, we don't see it on our end.
Oh, that's interesting. You don't see the CSV?
No, sir.
Oh, I am not 100% sure why. Let me stop sharing and reshare my window here, Kev. And let's do this. Entire screen. Share. There we go. How's that?
There we go. Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So sorry about that, Kevin. Feel free to interrupt me next time that's taking place. I don't know why I had my entire screen shared out last time, but so this is the IPC device information, the one that I was looking at here from Asbuilt. This will go ahead and output, like I said, a lot of information. But if you're focusing on which particular phones may be cloud capable, column AJ and AK, which will be the version ID and the hardware revision, are going to help you understand which of those phones are in particular can be cloud capable. All right. Any other questions out there, Kev?
I do not see any questions in the chat, Vic. It was a great presentation.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll kick the ball back over to you.
All right. That's all we've got for today. Sorry for running a little bit over, but thanks again for everybody who attended. We do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Our next session will be on August 28th, when John and Brian will be giving us a walkthrough of essential system health checks, things like feature functionality and disk-based management. So be sure to check that out. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next time.